One night of a new moon, I was around 12 years old. My mother and I found ourselves on the side of a pitch black Oklahoma country road with a broken down Chevy Impala. I mean the kind of pitch black city dwellers can hardly imagine. It can be dark enough that you cannot see the fingers in front of your face. Now this was long before cell phones. They even have still been on smoke signals. No, actually we were all the way up to shared party lines where our neighbors could listen in and snoop on us. That far out in the country we were. It was a ways back to our friend's farmhouse and many miles to our house in town. Of the two of us, my mother was decidedly not the adventurous one. She was frightened, and rightly so, given this was that kind of old country dirt back road surrounded by woods on either side and 6-foot deep drainage ditches along the sides of the road, and in that kind of dark, no visual ability to see if we were about to step off in one of those ditches. Now I don't remember having the thought, but all at once I declared to my mother, "Let's go back to the farmhouse. I can see in the dark." My mother said, "How?" I said, "Well, I can see with my feet and with my ears." Now, I must have sounded confident enough that she took my arm and followed my lead. Sure enough, we did make it back to our friend's house, and we got on the party line and told Thelma to get off so that we could call the town and get away home. Now, not much of it was made then, but years later in the telling of this story, my grandmother offered a comment that it was my native blood that taught me to see in the dark. This time of year we make much ado over light. That's good and right, and not to be diminished in any way. After all, in this community, Seekers, I've never heard one of you, not one, say you were seeking endarkenment. But come to think of it, I wonder why. Why do we so malign darkness? Why do we fear it? Why do we run from it? Why do we fight it? Why do we declare victory over it? When really, I don't think it's the dark that picked the fight. I think it's us. It is we who pit darkness and light against one another on earth and within ourselves, as though only one of those has anything to teach us, as though only one of those should be as much a part of us as the other, as only one of those is natural in earthly life, as though only one of those is truthful, as though only one of those could possibly be holy and sacred and divine. In her book, Learning to Walk in the Dark, Barbara Brown Taylor, an American Episcopal priest and theologian, puts it this way: "For now let us say that the word darkness is shorthand for anything that scares me. Anything I want no part of, either because I am sure that I do not have the resources to survive it, or because I do not want to find out. The absence of God is in there, along with the fear of dementia and the loss of those nearest and dearest to me. So is the melting of the polar ice caps and the suffering of children and the nagging question of what it will feel like to die. If I had my way, I would eliminate everything from chronic back pain to fear of the devil from my life and the lives of those I love. If I could just find the right light to leave on. But when we run from darkness," she asks us, when we run from darkness, how much do we really know about what we are running from? What if, I want to consider this morning, what if what we are running from when we run from the dark is actually the holy? What if what we run from when we run from the dark is actually the sacred, is actually the divine, is actually the most potent and passionate and daring truth, waiting for us to see it, not with our eyes, but with ourselves? Consider that the deepest, darkest darkness we know as human beings in physical existence comes before we even have consciousness that we can recall. It comes in the form of the soft darkness of our biological mother's womb as we grow and gather strength, not yet pushed into earthly life. The darkness there is filled with energy and potential and dreams not yet known, a being preparing for life here on earth. We can see in that dark only with our ears. We can hear the world outside. We cannot see it there in that soft, safe, waiting darkness. I know because my second son used to keep rhythm before he came here. And what of the darkness under the earth? What of the darkness where seeds too grow and gather their strength to push up through the verdant soil into earthly life, packed tight with life force, just waiting to burst through? What of the places within ourselves and our times in our lives that we speak of as dark times, that then became some of our most transformative experiences of the holy in body and mind and spirit? Perhaps right now this morning you find yourself in the midst of one of those times. Maybe you're wondering what will become of you. Maybe you too are fighting with darkness. Maybe you are finding yourselves tempted to believe there is no truth in it, no comfort in it, no courage in it, no hope. Well, let me tell you first right now that if this is true for you right now, you are not alone. Not on this planet, not in this community, and not in this room. Also, it's possible that you've been through such a passage before, not in it now. Well, you might not survive it, but you did. And here you are. None of us is spared our turns, and I did say turns, in darkness. Nor should we be. It is impossible to keep the lights on all the time, despite our best efforts, despite our good intentions, or our spiritual practices, or the depth of our faith, or the strength of our fortitude, or our service to humankind, or our love, or our education, or our healthy eating, or any of the hundreds of best-selling how-to be happy books and programs and seminars we might attend that dare the darkness to remain. It will return. It must return. As long as the earth spins, for day always gives way to night. And that's sometimes where we stop before we remember. And also gives way to day. You know, when we're stuck out in the bright sunshine, we don't say this is going to be over. And when we're stuck over here in the darkness, we say, please let this be over. As though both are not part of being human. of being spiritual, being creatures of the interconnected web of all living. It's a fact of life, as sure as gravity, as sure as hunger, as sure as thirst. And the truth is, we need the darkness as much as we need the light, in body and mind and in spirit. So what shall we do? Carl Jung, the psychoanalyst of the last century, best known for his explorations of the gaps between our conscious selves and our unconscious selves, said this: one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. By making the darkness conscious. Well, what does that mean? It means that recognizing darkness for what it is and what it is not, what it can be. It means understanding its portents. It means we make more trouble, more struggle, more pain to ourselves when we condemn the darkness rather than let it teach us. Barbara Brown Taylor continues, it is the inability to bear dark emotions that causes many of our most significant problems. In other words, it is not the emotions themselves. When we cannot tolerate the dark, we try all kinds of artificial light, including but not limited to drugs, alcohol, shopping, shallow sex, and hours in front of a television or a computer screen. Artificial light. There are no dark emotions, just unskillful ways of coping with emotions we think we cannot bear. The emotions themselves are nothing more than conduits of pure energy that want something of us, that want us to listen, that want to tell us something we need to know, to break up the ice around our hearts, to wake us up, to prompt us to move, to act. All of us have passed through, and maybe right now this morning, passing through times of excruciating loss and grief and illness and doubt that we would call darkness, bearing the unbearable. So excruciating, it took everything you had just to get here. We know. We see. And yet, having come through such passages, how many of us have turned back and said, I wouldn't wish that on anyone, and I wouldn't go through it again, but I also would not take it back, because I know I would not be who I am and do what I do if it had not been for that. And then a little further down the road, we discover that whatever that was, its experience prepared us to be of service to another, going through the same pain and wondering how they will survive. We know because we did. We learn that darkness need not mean death, but rebirth. Now here's the thing. When we come to understand that our experience of darkness is a time of transformation, we know it does not mean the absence of faith, but the call to trust even more. How many of you grew up in a faith system that said if you're having doubts and you're in darkness, it's because you don't have enough faith? I say no. I say no. Barbara Brown Taylor calls that living in full solar faith, instead of learning from the darkness that comes by the light of the moon. We know it does not mean the absence of faith, but the call to trust it even more when we become willing to consider that the unbearableness of it is asking us to face up to something we have been afraid to see, to hear, to understand, and we finally witness the truth unadorned, which can be a shattering truth. That's what transformation is, breaking up the old way and learning to walk in the new way. If we can do that without fleeing in fear or switching on the artificial light, that is when we can learn to see in the dark. That is when we make the darkness conscious. And when we have made the darkness conscious, we make it holy. For what is the holy but ultimate consciousness? Ask our pagan siblings whether dark can be holy or not. Whether celebration of the winter solstice is as much for the lessons we've learned in the recent darkness as heralding the sun's return. Ask our Jewish siblings whether the darkness of the temple was holy in their waiting to see if that lamp would burn. Ask our Christian siblings when the legend declares that the holy baby was born. When? Not at noonday. At midnight. In the dark. Ask the great prophets of every tradition about their long, dark nights of the soul that they endured and set down for us in texts of every language. Ask them what they found in that darkness that we too can find. They're not special, no more than we. So what if what we're running from when we run from the dark is actually truth itself that we have not yet been courageous enough to see? Truth by any name, by every name, and by none. What if in the midst of the darkness we fear the holy itself waits to meet us as we are and show us how to be more? What if we as individuals could acknowledge the teacher in the darkness, the resting in the darkness, remembering that being born is hard, it's not impossible. The beginnings always are hard. What if we as a people could prepare ourselves to learn to see in the dark instead of fearing it? To that end, say with me this litany for holy darkness. After each declaration, please say, "We will not be afraid. Though the dark may fall about us, we will not be afraid. Though we may not know how long the night, we will not be afraid. While we wait with our eyes, while our eyes adjust to the darkness, we will not be afraid. Let us learn the comfort and rest of the night. We will not be afraid. Let us open ourselves to the beauty we find there. We will not be afraid. When we meet the truth, we may find only at its depths. We will not be afraid. We will learn to live in both darkness and light. We will not be afraid. We will trust the truth we find in each. We will not be afraid. In this season of light, let us praise also darkness, that we may be a people of courage and grace, that our light may be purified, sanctified, edified, and free of fear, that That the truths in the dark we may find, we may come to tell in the light. As a child, I knew I could see in the dark. I was never afraid of it until I got older and discovered artificial light. I gave my life over to artificial light for a time, and then once more had to go through the dark to find the true light. That artificial light tempts me still, and perhaps you. But when I finally learned to quit fighting, when I finally quit trying to banish the darkness and fool myself that I even could, then is the most beautiful and brilliant light to be found within me. Within you, pure and clean and calm and bright, a holy light, unafraid of darkness, birthed by holy darkness. So now, as long these nights pass, as we have crossed the winter solstice, let us consider what we have learned within the darkness this time, what truths, what strength we may have gathered, as the child in the womb gathers strength for birth. What renewal has darkness prepared in us unawares? What new way to bring our own light to the world, even as the sun brings new light to the earth? And knowing that darkness will return as sure as night follows day, how do we prepare ourselves? What truth might we learn to see in this dark, that we may teach in the light? And let it shine, and let it shine, let it shine.